Welcome to this week's episode of Conversations That Count. I'm super excited to have Elizabeth Ann Walker join me today. And I'm excited that you're here because you've been such a massive part of my journey as well and the person I am today. And you've been an influence over the last few years in various forms. I'm excited that you're my very first guest. So
Yay.
I'll let you do an intro of who you are as well because,
So I'm Elizabeth Ann Walker. I'm Australia's leading integrated NLP trainer and I'm a global leader in NLP training. I've spoken on stages all around the world with people like Tony Robbins, Richard Branson, Robert Kiyosaki, Elena Cardone. I've mentored with lots and lots of different people. I've spoken on stages with Brene Brown, Lisa Nichols. I've written over 20 best-selling books now, which is exciting, and they're co-authored, so they're not just mine, they're co-authored, all about mindset. And I'm super passionate about changing the fabric of society through individuals' mindsets.
My God, I love that. And I love you. And that's, very inspiring to hear as well. And I'm sure we'll touch on that as we go through as well. So welcome. Where to even start? Because I have so many questions for you. And I know that we'll be able to talk for hours on end about everything. So maybe to start, if you just tell me a little bit about NLP, let's go there first.
Yeah.
High level, what's NLP? What do you do? And what is the training company that you've created?
Yeah, great. So NLP itself stands for, in a lot of people's worlds, natural language processing, and I am definitely nothing to do with computers. So that is not what we're talking about. What we're talking about here is neuro-linguistic programming. So neuro being the brain, linguistic being the words that we use, and programming being the programs that are in our software. So if we consider the brain as our hardware, the way that the brain operates is our software. And so the programs are outdated a lot of the time because a lot of people think that, you just go through life and your brain does what it's supposed to do. And from a unconscious perspective, it keeps your heart beating, it helps you breathe, and it does things like programs. And I'll explain that in easy terms. When you drive your car, when you first learn to drive, you have to think. And so you will think, hands on the steering wheel, 10 and 2, turn it 10 degrees to the left. Oh, remember the handbrake, remember the foot brake, remember the accelerator. It's all very conscious. But eventually you do it so much that you relegate it to the unconscious mind and it becomes a program. Now that's a super useful program so that we don't have to think all the time while we're driving. However, there are other programs that are not so useful to us. Things like I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I can't do it. It'll never happen for me. Those kinds of programs are actually limiting and they limit our experience as humans. The thing is you with your iPhone, you update it every time it says to update it.
Yeah.
With your brain, you have to do that as well. And so neuro-linguistic programming is like updating the software for your brain.
So where does the programming even start? And you mentioned touched on a little bit about the unconscious mind there as well.
Yep.
So how does that all work? And how does that operate who we are today as well?
Yeah. So our programming starts from a very young age, actually before we're even 3. And some people would argue while we're in the womb. So our programs are set in place between the ages of 3 and 7. And they've been happening before that. So that's when they start to actually become a thing. And you'll notice when little kids go to school in their first year of kindergarten, they say things like, well, Mrs. James said... And that's them believing Mrs. James instead of mummy now, for example. And that's a program. So we have programs for all sorts of things. We have a program for how we brush our teeth. You don't think about how you're going to brush your teeth. You just pick up the toothbrush and do it. And if you've ever had an operation on your hand and you've had to pick up the toothbrush with the other hand, you'll realize how uncomfortable it is because that program's not in your brain. Your program is in the brain to use your dominant hand. So these programs, like I said, can be useful and they can also be destructive and actually problematic.
Yeah.
And so people tend to go through life going, oh, well, that's just me. I can't do anything about that. But the truth is you can.
Yeah.
That's like saying you've got an old Nokia 6110 and you can't do anything about that. Yeah.
How do you change that? So that comment there, like so many people use, oh, like that's just the way I am, or that's just the way that they are.
Yeah.
And they're accepting them for all of their behaviors and thought process and stuff like that. So can you change that, and how do you actually change that?
Yeah, well, this is where we come into things like mindset, right? And so everyone knows about fixed mindset and growth mindset. So fixed mindset is, this is how I was born. There's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
And that's a very old-fashioned kind of belief these days. Most people who've had some connection to personal development or reading a book on personal development will know that fixed mindset's not really the way. You know, we've learned a lot about neuroplasticity, so the ability of the brain to change in the last 50 years.
Yeah.
And the brain can change. When I was born, there used to be a school near us for children who had brain injuries. And they believed those children could never change. Now, children with the same kind of brain injuries are doing all sorts of incredible things and actually becoming quite normal because we know that neuroplasticity exists.
Yeah.
So if we go from fixed mindset, we then end up at growth mindset. So that's like, okay, cool. This is what my circumstance was.
Yeah.
This is how I was born. And I know my brain can change. So I'm going to explore what it's like to grow.
Yeah.
Except that the problem with growth mindset is the word set is still in there. And if you think about jelly, when a jelly sets, it becomes something different. It's no longer the yummy crystals that you can dip your finger in and lick.
Yeah.
And it's no longer water. It's this wobbly stuff that some people like and some people don't.
Yeah.
With growth mindset, it still implies there's a fixedness to it. So it's kind of like, yeah, I can grow, but only this much.
Yeah.
What I love is Creative Imaginative Mind Flow, which is a system that I developed, which is all about how you can move past the setness of your mind and move into flow.
Yeah.
So this is where failure is actually the desired option.
Yeah.
If you do something so much and so well that you fail, then you've hit a boundary, and that shows you where growth is available to you. Whereas in growth mindset, you just do enough to be different from fixed.
Yeah.
In Mind Flow, you're pushing the boundaries of who you are and what you can do.
Yeah.
In Creative Imaginative Mind Flow, we're looking for things like you know more than you know.
Yeah.
And yet you're just not accessing it, because we know that we only access about 10% of our brain.
Which is crazy.
And 90% sits dormant.
Yeah.
So we want to move from fixed mindset through growth mindset and into creative imaginative mind flow.
And so many people are scared of failure, right? Like then there's all those beliefs that come up that like what if I'm fear of failure, fear of success, fear of being seen, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yet it's such a good thing because you learn through the doing and you learn through all of those experiences as well.
I don't know a successful entrepreneur that doesn't thrive in the failure.
Yeah.
Because and we do it quickly.
Yeah.
Right? So we might fail and we recover so quickly that most of the time people don't notice. And the failure is where you learn.
Yeah, 100%.
Like that's where the growth is.
I'm this year I'm really taking the model of like treat life as an experiment and learning through the failures, because that's where you learn, right? Rather than kind of thinking about doing something and not doing it, you just do it and then get that feedback along the way as well.
And you learn a better way every time.
Yeah.
Right? So every time you learn a better way and then you move faster through it.
And refinement.
I've got this saying, every level the same devil. So this, the same challenges will come up every time you hit that next level of who you are. And the ease that comes is how quickly you can move through that same challenge.
Yeah.
Because you have a whole new set of resources and tools. Yeah.
So how did you get here? Like what is, and I'm sure that there's going to be lots of moments through your life that has created you to be the person that you are today.
Yeah.
But tell me a little bit about who you are and what was one of like your biggest moments for catalyst for change?
Yeah, sure. So
a pretty big question, sorry.
Yeah, I'm like, which story do you want? Because there's about 7 of them, right? We all have such colourful lives that there's places. However, the big thing that happened to me was I had a beautiful family. I grew up very well looked after by my mum and my dad together. We had, we were upper middle class family. Everything was great. So I don't have the poor me story. Yeah. And all I wanted from the time I was 5 years old was to get married. I was like, I had the dress picked out. I had a scrapbook all prepared for my wedding. That was all I wanted. Have a great, beautiful fairy tale wedding, get married, have children and, be a beautiful wife. And I was so obsessed with that goal that I forgot about being me on the way. And so I had set a goal when I was 12 that I would be married when I was 21. Now, I didn't get married when I was 21. I got married when I was 22. That ended up being 13 years in an abusive marriage where the happy girl that I was dissolved into nothing, and I became a shell of myself. And it was pretty horrific. And, you know, anyone who's been through that kind of stuff knows how bad it can get, and it was bad. The thing is that after that, when I left finally, and that was dramatic, I was rescued by the police in a helicopter off an island in the Whitsundays. When I left, my goal became my children. I was like, whatever I do, I have to maintain their life. So they have to eat, they have to go to school, I have to work to make money, and it all became super masculine. It was all about, it was task driven. It was do this, do that, do the next thing, get it done. And I'm good at that. I'm a really great worker. And so I just made it happen. But then I started getting lonely. And I was like, oh, I really want to, you know, have a partner in life. Like I married someone so that I had a partner in life and a partner to raise my children. And I started on a dating site. So it was actually a surgeon that I used to work for because I was a nurse. And this surgeon that I worked for said to me, you know, there's this thing called Tinder. You should go on it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'd never been on any kind of site like that ever. And I said, what do I do? And he goes, just call me on the weekend. I'll help you set it up and we'll do it. So I called him. He showed me what to do in terms of setting up my profile. And in those days, Tinder was not just a hookup site. It was actually was a dating site. And so he showed me what to do and he said, okay, you're right, babe. And I'm like, yep. And he goes, okay, so just leave your phone sitting there overnight and in the morning you'll have a couple of messages from a couple of guys. And then you just talk to them like normal. Yeah. I'm like, okay, that sounds easy. So I put my phone down. I woke up in the morning to 385 messages.
Oh, wow.
And in those days, messages were free, right? So you just liked someone and then you could message them straight away. Yeah. And I was like, oh, my God. Like maybe I have some value here because I'd felt only valuable as a mother and a worker. And I was like, this is exciting. And so I started to get my mojo back a bit. And I'd had this, you know, significant stuff in my profile. Like I want someone who's my age. They have to be fun. Yeah. I'd done a lot of fun stuff in my life. I did flying trapeze for a sport. I'd been an Australian champion in trampolining. Yeah. So I was pretty much a daredevil physically. Yeah. And I wanted someone exciting. Anyway, I started dating all these 40-year-old guys and they were all fat and boring and ugly. Yeah. And I was like, wow, this like, am I just really judgmental or is this real? And I thought,
hasn't got any better.
And I thought, I don't know what to do. So I thought, oh, well, I went to a friend of mine. So I'm 36 at this, 35 at this time. And I went to one of my friend's 21st because all my friends were at least 10 years younger than me because that was who was involved in sport. Yeah. And so I went to her 21st and it was hilarious. And I ended up hooking up with this 18-year-old. Yeah. And I was like, what on earth? Like, I don't know what's going on, but it feels good. So we're just going to go with the feel good because I was having a year of everything I do has to feel good. Yeah. And so that happened and I was like, oh, maybe there's something in this. Like maybe these young guys have actually got more value than what I've given them credit for. Yeah. And it turned out that I ended up dating an 18-year-old when I was 36 and we were together for 5 years. And during that 5 years, it was great because I was in charge. I had the money. I was the one that worked hard. He was just having a great time, you know, with this older woman, a cougar, whatever you want to call it. And it was a beautiful relationship and he taught me how to love myself again. What I didn't do, though, was do that in the feminine. I did that in that masculine energy. And so I finally went, okay, we've got to get serious about life. He was like, I want to travel the world. You can't do that with your kids. I'm like, okay, cool. We had a beautiful breakup. And it led me to being serious about dating. Yeah. And I put on there all the things that I really wanted. I was like, if you can't handle me now, you're not going to handle me later. If you want me to pay for a date, I'm not interested. I like things the old-fashioned way. Yeah. If your date is going out for dinner, you're boring and, you know, we're not going to get on. Like, I have baggage. I'm happy to carry my own. I expect you to carry yours until we want to carry each other's.
Yeah.
So I was pretty direct.
Intentional with it.
And I was like, this is what I want. So we went from there, and I met Simon, who is now my husband.
He's a beautiful man.
He is so amazing. Like, I didn't know the relationships could be that good.
Yeah.
And I met him, and after about 6 months, I got very, very ill. And I couldn't understand why. He would carry my bag at the airport. That was weird for me. He would come clothes shopping for me, and if I tried something on that was nice, by the time I got out of the change room, he'd already bought it. There was all this stuff happening that I didn't know how to receive. And I got really, really sick after 6 months of being with him. So sick that I had 47 operations in a 3-year period. I died clinically twice on the table and was revived. I died just walking through a hospital once. I just had this attack and ended up with no blood pressure, and they revived me. So I've been revived 3 times. And after the 3rd time, you start thinking, maybe there's something about life. Like someone wants to keep me alive, so there's some kind of purpose that I'm supposed to be doing that I'm not doing. And I just felt awful because I was so sick, and I had this man who loved me so much, and all I could do was lay in bed. Like, he would have to shower me, he'd have to feed me, he'd have to carry me up and down the stairs. And I was like, I gave 13 years to this guy who never treated me nicely. And now I can't even give 6 months to this person who's perfect in my eyes. Yeah. And what do I do? And I got to a point where I was like, he's never going to leave me, so I'm just going to have to die. Like, I hate my life. I'm in pain all the time. I love him. It's not fair on him. Well, he's just going to end up caring for me, and then I'll die anyway, so I may as well die now. So I stopped eating, and he noticed. And it was at that point that my best friend just happened to ring with some tickets to Tony Robbins and said, look, they're $1,000. I'd like you to come. And I'm like, babe, I've been sick for 3 years. We have no money. Like, you know, we can't afford the kids' school stuff. We're maxed out 3 different credit cards. I can't spend $1,000 on myself. And Simon sat by my bed and cried and begged me to want to live. And he said, we're going to put this on and you're going to do this for yourself. And I went along, and I was in a wheelchair. I couldn't walk. So one of the surgeries, they'd botched a bit, and they'd severed my femoral nerve and femoral arteries, so I couldn't walk. So I turned up to Tony Robbins in this wheelchair. They push me in. It's all dancing and singing, and I'm like, this is just so dumb. Like, I'm in this wheelchair. I can't do anything. And then it gets to the firewalk night, and they push my wheelchair out towards the firewalk, and I'm like, you guys are nuts. Like, this thing has rubber wheels. Like, I don't know what you're doing. But I can feel the heat of the fire and these people. And then I get to the edge, and these 2 people stand me up, and I just walk across the fire. And I kept walking. And I never went, like, I left the wheelchair there. I never went back in the wheelchair. And I went back to my surgeon, and they're like, this is a miracle, and this can't happen. And I said, no, it's just a miracle, and it is happening. And they kept telling me how it couldn't happen. And I said, I'm not coming to see you anymore. Like, I'm done. I'm walking. I like walking. I'm not going to play this game with you. But I need to know what it was at Tony Robbins that flipped the switch. Like, what it was that made all the other nerves in my leg go, hey, we can do the job of that femoral nerve. We can take over. What it was that allowed neuroplasticity to happen. And I found out it was neuro-linguistic programming. And all that had happened that day was some programs of I'm sick, I can't do it, were disconnected. And I realized that I could do it. And so I went off and I studied neuro-linguistic programming. I then realized that actually I could teach it better than anyone who I'd learnt from. And so I started teaching it. And now I run a multi-million-dollar business in personal development, largely centered around neuro-linguistic programming.
That, like, I've heard that story a couple of times, and every time I think it just blows my mind at, I guess, it's a testament to the person that you are to actually keep going and to go from rock bottom where potentially people would have given up and taken a different path. And you were like, do you know what? That's not for me. And you're like, I'm just going to go all in here. And to now go through that, and I know that, you know, that story was over years, to go through that to now being having such an impact on other people's lives. Like, that's just beautiful and so inspiring in itself. And it goes to show you the power of the mind as well.
Absolutely.
And maybe can we just kind of go through that a little bit more, because you spoke about I'm not good enough, and I like the label of even like your diagnosis as well, and things like that. You know, it's the stories that we tell ourselves that we believe that then creates the action and the behavior that we do. So can you talk through that a little bit more? Like, how did you actually change your thought process going from, I guess, I don't want to say negative mindset, but in a way. It
was definitely negative. I wanted to kill myself.
Yeah. So how did you actually change that thought process? Because I'm sure it was all internal, right? Like, you weren't going around and going, I'm this or that, because, you know, we don't verbalize it, but us even thinking about it is still us telling ourselves.
Yeah, so there's a thing in your brain called the reticular activating system. So what you're focused on is what you'll find. And the easiest way to demonstrate this to people is if you're wanting to buy a new car and it's a green Corolla, all of a sudden you'll see green Corollas everywhere on the road. And it's because your mind's looking for it. So if you're depressed, for example, you'll see depressing things everywhere because your mind's looking for it. If you've got anxiety, you'll see things that can make you anxious everywhere because your mind's looking for it. And so we've got a conscious mind and an unconscious mind. So the conscious mind is what we can hear and what the thoughts that we're aware of. But the unconscious mind is back there running these programs and filtering everything through what we're focused on. So say someone who's got anxiety, they're going to be looking to avoid situations that make them anxious. But because they're looking to avoid them, they have to see them before they can avoid them, and therefore they become more anxious. So the real flip of the switch is, how can you change your focus? And Tony Robbins talks about this beautifully. He calls it, it's called the Tony Robbins triad. So he looks at your state, and if you imagine a triangle, your state's in the middle of the triangle. So the state is the way you feel. And the things that make up your state are focus, physiology, and meaning. So what are you focused on? What are you thinking about a lot? What are you looking at a lot? What are you feeling a lot? What is your physiology? Because you can't do depression if you're standing up with your arms up in the air, right? That doesn't look like depression. There's a physiology associated with things like depression. Your shoulders are slumped, your stomach's slumped, your legs are kind of floppy. And then the meaning. So the meaning that you give things. And an example of that would be your husband comes home 20 minutes late from work, and you might have a meaning of there was traffic, or you might have a meaning of he's having an affair. Both of them are probably not true. He probably was 10 minutes late and there was a little bit of traffic or something like that. But it's what you're focused on that will determine your life. Our thoughts create our reality, and our thoughts are powerful because we actually have this ability to transmute our thoughts into energy and behavior, which creates what's happening around us. So our focus of our thoughts and our visualizations of the future are what determine what we have. So
you mentioned when you were talking through your story as well, like around masculine and feminine and surrender as well, and receivership. And I love this topic so much because, you know, that's part of my journey as well, as actually learning all about the energies and tapping back into the feminine as well. Yeah. Can you talk through that in a little bit more detail? Like, how did that play out in your life, and how do you think that in that moment what was the lesson for you as well, like in that receivership? I thought I was so in control of my life. Yeah. Like, I had everything scheduled. I was in control of everything. I was like, okay, if this happens, then I'll do this. If that happens, I'll do this, this, and this. Yeah. Like, I had a contingency plan for everything. I would do recon missions to, like, if I was going to drive somewhere and I had to be there on time, I would have driven there the day before to make sure I'd get there on time. Yeah. I was a control freak. Yeah. And that was great in terms of discipline. Yeah. But horrific in terms of meltdowns, because occasionally you couldn't predict everything and something completely left of field would happen and I wouldn't have a plan for it and I'd have a complete meltdown, and it was completely ineffective. And so I think that the way that you talk about
things and the way you plan in your mind, that receivership is all about letting go of that. It's letting go and allowing things. Now, it doesn't mean not having discipline, because the beauty of the divine feminine or the divine masculine energy is that you can move between both freely and easily, right? And the divine masculine definitely has discipline. So we want to be able to be disciplined, but also to be able to soften so that we can receive something from someone who's more masculine, or a man if we're a woman, and actually enjoy receiving that. So I know that there's days where I am working really, really hard, and I'm perhaps on calls or doing stuff from 5:30 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. And my husband makes my meals for me on days like that. And on days like that, that's just part of his job.
Yeah.
Like, my job is to do the thing. His job is to feed me and look after me. And I sometimes forget to say thank you. So I have a technique where when I walk through the door of my office back into the home, I have this, imagine all these golden lights just dribbling down on me. And as I walk through that door, it's like, okay, I'm back and I'm his wife and I'm in the feminine, and I go out and I can have a cuddle and really feel it. Whereas in the past, I would just walk out and be like, I got to do this and I got to do that, and put the washing on and
Next thing.
like, and it was just the next thing. So it's about how can you slow down just in moments. You don't have to slow down a lot, but just in moments to allow your heart to be open to receive what someone's doing for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think especially as females as well, like, it's so easy for us to, and working females as well, like, just in the doing, I'm the next thing, just do. And we then close off to receiving that at the same time. So I feel like that's been a massive unlearning for a lot of females as well, is actually it's okay that you step outside of the masculine and now you move back into the feminine, and you're allowed to surrender and receive and be cared for. Yeah,
and a lot of the problem is there's a lot of women who are doing the masculine thing, never doing the feminine thing, but then there's equally women who do too much of the feminine thing and never any of the masculine. And the beauty is in the balance.
Yeah.
Like, and if we think about wealthy women, we're looking at women who are about to inherit an incredible amount of wealth. And like, I don't know if you've read any financial reports recently, but there was a report written last year from data collected from 2019 all the way through to 2024 that says that women in Australia in particular are about to inherit 3.2 trillion in the biggest wealth transfer that has ever happened in the history of Australia. As we have older men who are entrepreneurs dying and passing wealth to their wives, we also have those older men dying and passing wealth to their eldest daughter because they happen to just have a lot of eldest daughters, right? And as women, our ability to receive that wealth, and you might be sitting there listening to this thinking, I'm not getting any of that. That's not actually true, because women, when they invest money, invest it consciously. They invest it in social projects. They invest it in helping other women to become better at what they do. And so when I look at that, I go, right now, your ability to receive and your ability to have discipline and your ability to have a great mindset is super important because we're about to see a massive shift in the world, and particularly in Australia, of the way that wealth happens. And let's keep it simple. Wealth is not just money, by the way. In this study it was. However, wealth is lots of different things. You define what wealth is for you. But we're about to see a big shift in the way money works in Australia based on the transfer of wealth to women. And I think that as women, being able to receive that and looking at us as a collective and going, oh, as a collective, there's some exciting things happening in the world of women right now. We can use our mindset to access that. And this is the thing I'm super passionate about, is how do you access and prepare yourself to know more about that? Because wealth in the hands of women has never happened on a large scale before, and it's about to.
So I know that really, like, especially the women, can you talk me through your mission as well? Because I feel like that leads into what it is that you're here to do and what you're looking to create, and talk through why. Yeah. Like, maybe just talk through,
Yeah, so the mission that I have is that I want women to be able to be women in their full expression. And what that looks like is helping men to become men and be unafraid of actually standing in their power. Like, men are amazing. They are powerful people. And yet throughout women's lib in the 60s and 70s and continuing on, we ended up in a position where men were no longer allowed to be men, but they weren't allowed to be women either. Women weren't really allowed to be women, but they weren't allowed to be men either. And we kind of ended up in this place where there's no real definition of the difference between a man and a woman, yet physiologically there's a big difference. On a mental and hormonal scale, there's a big difference. And so my mission is to allow men to become men again, to have women feel safe enough to allow men to be men again, so that they can actually create phenomenal partnerships and raise children that feel safe. Because when that safety transfers through generations, we end up with a way bigger amount of wealth in relationships, wealth in communication, wealth in finances, wealth in actually the nation and the globe. Like, this is a global mission where if men can become men, if women can feel safe enough to let men be men and then create great families, we're going to have an incredible future.
So how do women create safety? Yeah. And how do men return back to being men?
Yeah, it's fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
So women often try to outsource this. And there's no way you can feel safe as a woman other than in your own body. Right? You, in your body and your mind, is where safety is created. Looking to a man or another woman or your parents or anyone else to create safety for you is always something that can be taken away from you. True safety is created right here in your heart. Like, true safety is created inside of self. True safety is knowing that you know your values and that you're living according to them. True safety is knowing that you know your yeses and you know your nos. It's the ability to move forward fearlessly towards what you want with no self-doubt. Yeah. And all of that comes back to mindset. In terms of how do men get to be real men, well, I can give you a classic example because I was on the phone to someone this morning who is a man who has given up his business to go traveling with his partner. And he feels like he has no purpose right now. So we have to get men back to where they're purposeful. And that purpose doesn't necessarily have to be them in a business. Like, my husband's purpose is to support me in my business. Yeah. And he loves that purpose. So it depends on what their purpose is, but we need to get them back to having a purpose and being on purpose so that they actually have time to want to care for their women and want to care for their children.
Do you think that, because through your rooms and your training and also like through the coaching I do and things like that as well, and the company, it's centered mainly around women because women are wanting to do the work and they want to now take care of themselves as well. Do you think that then leaves a massive gap for men, or do you think that there's been a shift there, or there will be more of a shift there for then men to follow as well?
Yeah, what's been really exciting in our business is it has originally been feminine led, right? So the women come first. And then they go home with such changes that their men go, I don't know what that is, but I want some of that. Like, they're happy, true happiness. Yeah, not the kind where it's just faking for a few hours. Like real, they're actually happy and they're joyful and they've changed. And then the men come. And so we have this interesting cycle that happens in our room where we'll get a training full of women and the next one will be half men. And the next one will be all women and the next one will be half men. And what's great is that the men that have come into our rooms to do our training, so many of them have gone on to form fantastic businesses that are impacting men. Right? And our business impacts men and women. However, there are many businesses that just impact women or just impact men. And I'm really proud of the fact that we've been able to impact men on a level that they are creating, world-changing businesses of their own. We create a lot of millionaires from our rooms where people just let go of their problems and get really on purpose with what they want to do in the world. And it's super exciting when men come in and do that. And I love it when women do it. Yeah,
I love it. It just warms my heart when I see men doing work. I love it so much because I see so many women doing it as well. So that's great. You mentioned purpose. Yeah. Do you think we're born with purpose, or do we create purpose, or how do we find it?
Well, that's interesting. So a lot of people talk about finding your purpose. You don't find it, you choose it. It's a choice. And your purpose can be anything you want it to be. I think people get obsessed with finding their purpose as if they're going to have this divine light go, oh.
It doesn't happen like that.
It does for some people. Like some people get a dream in the middle of the night and wake up and they follow their passion.
Yeah.
Some people, you know, just have a little idea and keep following the thread. And I think people get obsessed a little bit with goals. And I love goals. I think goal setting is super important. However, there's this concept of get married to the process and divorce the result. Right? If you want something, get married to the process. You do the things to get there. The result might change along the way because you might start, like the very first business I had, I was 5 years old. I was picking rose petals out of my mother's garden, mashing them up with water and going around to people's houses saying, do you want to buy some perfume?
Yeah.
Like that was my first entrepreneurial business, and I would sell the perfume for 20 cents. Like there were no overheads. I was using the petals from my mum's garden. I was using the water. Like there was no problem. It was just, I woke up one day and went, I want money for the shop. How can I make money? Oh, I can make perfume. People like perfume. I'll sell perfume. Yeah. And of course, everyone in the street bought it because how cute is it to have this little girl come up
I'd say yes.
with perfume, right? And so I ended up with, I was rich. Yeah. Like I could afford to buy 20 eucalyptus lollies every time they paid me. And that was pretty cool. So I think that when you start like that, my intention was not to be a perfumerer. Yeah. If that's, I think that's how you say that word. My intention was just to keep setting goals. And I remember when I set the goal to speak on a stage with Tony Robbins, I was like, I'm going to be a speaker the same as him. We're going to share stages together. It's going to be incredible. The very first time I spoke with him, afterwards, I thought I would be so excited. I thought I'd be so elated. And afterwards, it was just kind of like, oh, well, I've done that now. And the celebration was really of who I'd become to get there, not of actually doing the thing. And so I think as we move forward, this purpose thing, it's about consistently choosing the next step that you end up living a life that you're really proud of.
I love that so much because and I've been like that in the past where you get so caught up in the goal and the outcome and what it is that you're looking to create. But I've realized that it's about the journey.
Yes.
And it never ends because even when you achieve that goal, you don't go, okay, cool, that's it. I don't have another goal now. You then set the new goal and then it's becoming that person in order to be able to achieve it. Yeah. So yeah, I really love like the journey of the becoming that is the power.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. You mentioned that your room, you've had a lot of successful people come out of that room.
Yeah.
What do you think are some of the qualities that sets people apart from either achieving their goals or being super successful in business or what they're creating to someone that doesn't like create that? What's the difference between, making it or not?
Yeah, action. So the thing is we have thoughts, behavior, and action. And in order to have success, whether it's success in a feeling or success in a creation or success in building something or success in wealth, it all involves action. So you've got your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. That's what creates change. And all of that sits inside an environment. So if we imagine that we've got this bubble that we live in, that bubble is our environment. So who are you hanging around? What kinds of things do they believe and what are they saying? What kind of place are you living in? What do you do when you go outdoors? Is it nice? Is it not nice? Like, what's your environment? Then you have your thoughts. What are they like? Are they congruent with what you want or are they completely opposite? You have your feelings. So if something that you want makes you feel bad, you're probably not going to do it. And you have your actions. To create change, you actually need to change all four things. So you need to have a great environment, you need to have great thoughts, great behaviors, and great actions. Now, most people can handle changing their thoughts, although after a period of time, if they don't get the results, they may revert back to their other thoughts. Most people are happy to change some of their behaviors. A lot of people are not aware of how to change their feelings, and most people do not want to change their environment. And so I think back to a time when I was actually teaching medicine at Sydney University, and I taught medicine there for 5 years, and I worked with a fertility specialist for a while. And he used to say to women who wanted to have a baby, if you really want to have a baby, move out of Sydney.
Yeah.
Because I lived in Sydney at the time. And people would say, what? And he'd ask people, how much do you really want to have a baby on a scale of 1 to 10? They're like, 10, I really want a baby. And he's like, great, move out of Sydney. Because his belief was that stress created challenges for hormones, which created challenges for pregnancy. And every single patient that moved out of Sydney got pregnant. Some of the ones that stayed in Sydney got pregnant. Now, a lot of people aren't willing to take that action and change their environment so significantly, even though they desperately want the thing. So how can you create so much uncertainty around you that you have to change instead of always trying to create certainty? And the reason that people want to create certainty is because they want safety. And like I said before, safety is here. It's not in an environment. It's not with a particular group of people. I can be anywhere in the world and feel completely safe because I feel safe in my own body.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's such a powerful one, isn't it? The safety piece and the uncertainty, and embrace that.
Yeah, it's the action. Like if someone's willing to take action and keep taking action towards the thing. Now, granted, there are some people that do the same thing over and over and expect a different result. That's not going to help you.
Isn't it?
No. Pretty sure that's the definition of insanity, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So the thing is how can you take action
and
evaluate your action and then take more action? Because I really believe, like, there were a lot of people who started their entrepreneurial journey at the same time as me, and I'm successful and they're not. And the reason for that is I kept going.
Yeah.
I kept taking the action, even when it was hard, even when people hated me, even when there was a whole big campaign on social media, to say that I was a terrible person and all this stuff. I just kept going.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. It's the behavior, it's the action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if someone's listening right now and they're like, I'm not living the life that I thought I was going to live, and whether it's they're in a position they don't like or a relationship that they're unhappy in, or just deep down they have this knowing that this is not what I want, what would be like 3 pieces of advice that you'd give them that they could implement now?
Yeah. So number 1, write down a list of everything you don't want and just get it out of your head. Number 2, put a song that you love on for 2 minutes and give yourself 2 minutes to write everything that you want. So write the things that you want to buy, the way you want to feel, the people who you want around you, like the experiences you want to have. Spend 2 minutes, go like crazy and write everything you want. And then circle the top 5 things that you want.
Yeah.
And then look back at the things you don't want and notice what you have to suddenly eliminate out of your life in order to get what you do want.
That can be hard sometimes, can't it?
It'll be quite confronting for some people. Once you realize what it is you don't want, then it's a mindset journey. And that's when coming and doing a training like integrated NLP and getting some coaching around that is going to help you on that mindset journey to make the changes that you know are congruent with who you are. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great advice there as well. In a professional setting, what role do you think mindset and self-awareness can have in regards to overall performance of an organization change, leadership, overall culture and well-being of employees as well?
Yeah, so this is interesting because generally you would say that the person at the top dictates the culture of everything below. However, with big corporate professional organizations, you've got someone at the top of every division or the top of every team. And so we're really looking to those people to be the leaders in change. And so if they're so busy that they don't have time to look at themselves in the way that they're creating or fostering a culture of change or a culture of positive change in their world, then nothing's going to really happen. So in terms of where I see this fitting is I think that every person in a management position, definitely every person in a C-suite of a corporate business, must have a level of understanding of mindset and the way that people change and the language that people use in their own minds, because it allows you to motivate people.
Yeah.
Right. And motivation is what keeps people going. And it's not about the rah-rah, build them up kind of motivation. It's not like the Wolf of Wall Street where they're singing the song and banging their chest. It's more about, are you approachable so that if they have a challenge with being motivated, they can come and see you? And then do you have the right words to give to them? It's more about if someone's looking to move up on that corporate ladder, are they given the right resources to be able to do so? Or are they told early enough that actually it's not possible for them so that they can seek out a different path? And so it always is top down, but it seems to largely these days be generated from bottom up. Yeah. And what I mean by that is a lot of new people in the workforce, they know about mindset because it's part of common culture now. Whereas a lot of the older people in the organizations are not as open to it. And they say things like, well, it wasn't like that in my day. I didn't do it like that. I never had someone hold my hand when I did it. And those things are completely unhelpful. Yeah. What would be helpful is if everyone could have access to that kind of mindset training that's available. And by having that access and all learning at the same time, it fosters a group mentality and a community mentality, which allows everyone to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that can occur through things like corporate training days. It can come through team days that are facilitated by someone who's well-versed in mindset. It can come from, creating programs for people who are just starting out on the corporate ladder, who are looking for, progression and promotion. Like, how are we nurturing that new talent and new talent acquisition? Like, all of those things can.
And it has a ripple effect as well, right? Like as soon as you start focusing, like if you're an individual focusing on your mindset, it has that flow-on effect to all parts of your life.
Yes.
And you spend most of your life at work. So, it should be carried.
It should be part of it.
Yeah, part of it as well. What's one book or practice or idea that's transformed your perspective recently?
Recently?
Yeah.
No, I'm just going to sound like a weirdo. It was the recently word that threw me. So there's been many books.
Take out recently.
No, there's been many books that have transformed my life. And a recent one has been learning a lot about water. And I'm not talking about the water you drink or anything like that, but just the movement of water, the persistence of water, the way that water is able to move and flow and change and adapt, the way that water can become different things. Like if you think about the water cycle. Yeah. And so I've had a bit of an obsession with water lately and learning about water. And what that's changed for me is it's allowed me to connect to the water within me. And when things are changing rapidly the way I want or rapidly the way I don't want, it's like, what can I change within the molecular structure of the water within me to allow me to flow through this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh God, I have so many more questions on that too. That was, like, do I even go there?
That's probably a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, I was like, hang on.
If we go to the past before it became really weird.
Recently,
If we go a little bit
wasn't
further,
weird, it was perfect.
If we go a little bit further back, I remember reading a book called E Squared by Pam Grout. And
never heard of it.
It's an interesting book, and it was probably, a combination of mindset and spirituality and a little bit on the manifestation kind of side. And she talks a lot about the reticular activating system. Now, don't quote me on this. I don't know if she actually used those words, but that was what she was talking about in the book. And it had a series of tasks that you could do where you noticed how if you changed your thoughts, the universe would change. Now, that's where I started with that book. And that I was like, okay, this is cool. So I can actually start thinking about this, and then that's just going to show up in my life. And it does. The thing is are you willing to take the action? So I want to dissuade anyone from just going, oh, just manifest it.
Yeah.
And think hard in their brain. Manifestation involves taking actions towards what you want. So that was one book. The other book that really impacted my life, which is a book from when I was very young, and I still have and I read it yearly, is a book called The Miracle Tree. Now, I can't tell you who it's by because it doesn't actually have an author written in the book. It's a very old book that my grandfather had from when he was a boy, so it just had a title, was bound in material, and it didn't say who wrote it. And it's about a little tree that is in the forest, a pine tree, and it looks up at all the big pine trees and it notices how the big pine trees are so perfect. And every year at Christmas time, they come to cut one tree down to be displayed in the square of the city. And this little Christmas tree is constantly looking up at the big trees that get cut down, thinking they're perfect. I'm never going to be that tree. I'm never going to be the tree that everyone picks. I'm never going to be the tree that is the one that's revered by the community. And then one night, there's one grand tree that they never used to cut down, but they used to decorate in the forest. And one night this big storm comes and the big tree that's the proudest tree in the forest starts to fall, and the little tree is able to catch the big tree. And the little tree finally realizes that it has a purpose, and its purpose was to prop the big tree up to stop it dying. And it just allows it then becomes a bent tree, but it allows it to keep living. And I think that story inspired me from when I was very young, that whilst you can have your own success, it may not look the way that you thought it would look, but what you impact in the bigger picture is far more valuable.
I love that. Yeah, that's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
What question were you hoping I would ask today that I haven't asked, or what? Yeah.
This is a great question.
Because I have so many more questions, and I know that we could probably talk for days on so many different topics.
I have no idea. There are so many questions I can answer, so it's like, oh, what question have you not asked? So I think, like, you probably haven't asked many opinion questions, and I quite like giving opinions. And I think perhaps the question of what's the one thing that you're consistently happy to change? That's a great question.
What's your answer?
My mindset. There's always more to learn. There's always more to grow. There's another way of looking at it. There's always more. Like, a lot of people sit there and they go, I can either choose this or this. There's always a third, fourth and fifth choice. It's never just one or the other. Like, it's the expansion of that mindset into those grey areas that you weren't even aware of. I love doing that regularly.
So how do you, as someone that is as successful as you are, and I know that you've got so many projects on the go, like, and you're there for so many people, like, how do you continue with your own growth and your own journey as well, and making sure that you're leaning into making sure that you're growing and evolving as a person? Yeah,
so I have a mentor, first of all, and that's a private arrangement, so no one knows who it is, and I'm their mentor as well, so it's like a mentorship swap. And I really enjoy that no one knows who that is, because they are very, very different from me, and they do completely different stuff from me, and it works really, really well. So that's part of it. I read a lot. Like, I really enjoy reading. And so I read a lot. So I'm constantly updating myself, mainly on research. So I'm looking at what is the new stuff that's coming out. Equally, I'm following the money of the research to determine whether it's valid or not valid. I really love pushing into being uncomfortable. So I'll put myself in situations where it is like, how the hell are we going to do this? Like, you know, so perhaps spending a lot of money on a project and just going, here you go, let's hope it works. Having had some research into it and actually making sure that it's something that I want to be involved in. I enjoy starting new businesses. I enjoy helping businesses become successful. I enjoy helping businesses or people shut down businesses and change trajectory, like, so pivoting. They're the kinds of things that I do for fun and growth.
Do for fun.
Business acquisition is fun. It helps you grow. I think growing your own business is fun, like learning how to manage people. Like, there's always another level of how can you manage these people.
What motivates you to keep going? Like, I mean, you've reached a certain level of success now as well. And I always find that this is an interesting one, like, especially when people reach a certain position, like even in a company as well. Like, they're just wired differently, I believe. And what keeps you going and, motivating you? And is there I know that we were talking about goals, but is there kind of like an end goal that you're looking to achieve, or you're just like, yep, I'll keep doing that?
No, I know that this is an ongoing mission and that it will not be completed in my lifetime.
Yeah.
So I'm well aware of this mission not having an end date, which I really like because it means that I'm set. Yeah. So there's probably 3 things that keep me going. Number 1, there's still pain, emotional and physical in the world. And while that exists, I haven't finished. Number 2 is there's still people who feel unsuccessful in the world. And so while that exists, I'm not finished. And number 3 is I have a 10-month-old grandson who is super cute.
Oh my God, he's beautiful.
And I want his world to be incredible. And so while there's other stuff going on and he's there, I haven't finished.
Yeah, he's beautiful. I love seeing you as a grandma as well. Like, because I've seen you in so many different content.
Roles,
yeah, 100%. And so I just love seeing that side of you as well. It's really beautiful,
yeah,
really sweet.
I never, like, I loved my children a lot and it was like I always felt really emotionally connected to my children. But, little Flynn, there's this thing that it's just like, I haven't seen him for a few days. He's been on holidays and there's this piece of my heart that's like stretching and like, come on. He comes home this afternoon and it's like,
bless.
and then I also equally don't want to be that grandma that's at the door waiting for them to get home going, hello. Like, so there's this real balance I get to play in that, which is great growth for me of wanting to be there all the time and equally respecting that they're their own family and giving them time. Yeah.
Oh, it's so sweet. What's one key message you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
Keep going. Someone said to me at the time when I first left my ex-husband, it was about a year afterwards, and I was crying saying, when is it going to get better? When am I going to feel differently? How is it ever going to change? And they said to me, it's probably not going to end, but here's the advice I can give you in the beginning. And I said, what? Because I didn't really understand that at the time. I was emotional. And he said, well, everything's okay in the end. And I went, well, when's the end? And he goes, well, if it's not okay, it's not the end. And I'm like, okay, cool. Now, having said that, that incredible man that was my ex-husband, and it might seem strange to say that, has gone on to become someone who's actually come to my trainings, has completely changed his life, has then gone and invested all in on Tony Robbins and done all his trainings, and is now a person who I'm happy to see a photo yesterday of my grandson with. So change is possible for everybody, and change is possible for all of the listeners, and all you have to do is keep going.
Yeah, I love that.
It's not okay, it's not the end. Yeah,
that's beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've absolutely loved our conversation. And I know that, I feel like we opened a lot of loops there and probably touched on a lot of topics as well. So, I really appreciate your time.
Yay.
And thank you.
Thanks, Gian.
Bye.
Bye.